Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me well. Thank you for being here. As Iga said, I'm currently the CEO of Polish branch of Anima International, and for many years I've been involved in campaigning myself, leading campaigns and overseeing campaigns that we lead as an organization, supervising other campaigners. But today I'm sharing the stage for other great campaigners from all over the world, actually. And they're here to help me to answer the question, what's stopping us from building more effective campaigns? Can you see the slides? Maybe. The goal of this discussion is to answer the question, what's stopping us from building more effective campaigns? Because if we want to save as many animals as is possible, we need to get better and better at what we do to increase the impact that we make in this world. But before I let our guests talk, let me explain some basics. So what do I actually mean when I say campaigning? Campaigning is every effort, every activity that we take in order to change the world that we see around us for the better for animals. We see the reality, we set the goals, and we choose the strategy to get to the goal we choose. Campaigning sometimes means political advocacy, but sometimes it means getting deep into the corporate world. Sometimes campaigning means organizing loud protests on the streets, and sometimes it means negotiations, leading to shaking hands with people that we quite often consider our enemies. Campaigning means sometimes shouting loud with a lot of anger, but sometimes it means sharing the table with people that we really don't want to share the table with. Sometimes campaigning requires wearing a suit, and sometimes it requires a face paint. In the end, the sad truth is that most campaigning actually fails, even if you have many successes. I think it's true that most of the campaigning fails in the end. So to get the best possible answer to the question, how to build better campaigns, how to be better at what we do, we have 4 guests. So let me introduce them. Toby Schiønning, hope that's right. He's co-founder of Anima International, involved in animal rights for more than 15 years, long time. Specialized in corporate outreach, campaigning, media work, currently very focused on the broiler chicken campaign. Chris Liptrot, CEO and co-founder of International Council for Animal Welfare. Chris is an expert of corporate negotiations and campaign design on a global level, who negotiated policies with world's largest food companies, previously known as part of Mercy for Animals. Ben Newman, co-director of Animal Rising. Ben has been responsible for many disruptive actions, as for example, delaying the world's biggest horse race, the Grand National, or leading to the 24 hours closure of UK distribution centers of McDonald's. And Abigail Penny runs the Animal Equality UK, a very well-known organization, using many campaigning tools, their undercover investigations, legal advocacy campaigns, and public awareness actions get routinely a lot of mainstream attention. So that's my introduction, but I would like also to introduce yourself. So the first question to you is, why are you a campaigner and what makes you good in this role? And please, don't be humble. It's good for the animals to be bragging a lot about yourself, at least today. So why are you a campaigner and why do you think you're good in this role? Toby, you want to start?
Well, because I realized there was something wrong with the way we treat animals. So I wanted to get involved, and I didn't know how to do it. And I think most of us don't know how to do it, or at least it has taken us a while. So I think I've done a lot of clumsy things in the beginning. And over time, I started developing some ideas of how to do it. And I think I've changed my approach quite a lot over the years. But I don't think I should go so much into details now in the introduction, and just pass it on, and then we can see where the discussion goes for us. Yeah.
Is this working? Yeah. You asked us not to be humble, but I think I'm not really a good campaigner. Because like when I think about campaigns, I think about like people who are thinking of really creative tactics, people who are great at like project managing and getting stuff done, and like using digital tools to like figure out how to pressure your targets. And I think I'm terrible at basically all of that. I think the things, yeah, great. I think the things that I am really good at, I think I'm an excellent strategist. I think like this is something I'm realizing is like more or less a more rare skill in the movement now that I've been around longer, and I didn't realize I was good at this for a while. I think for me in particular, my activism is like basically purely fueled by rage. Like a lot of people find different sources of power. I think this is mine. And I think that I'm really a pretty good judge of other people, and just been fortunate enough to try to surround myself with people who are really good at the things that I know I really suck at. And this has allowed me to increase my own effectiveness in winning campaigns.
I think also a good trait of campaigners is that they tend to think it's their fault. So if you say you're not good, I feel it's this kind of trait that is always our fault. Ben?
Hello. Well, probably I'd say one of the. Hello.
Yeah.
Maybe it's well, something. Well, I wouldn't talk about myself so much, but we like number one thing is we just don't let. I don't, and we don't let people tell us what's possible. That's the number one thing. So many times, the experts have said what can be achieved, and the number one thing to do is to not listen. And the other thing I think of what makes me and others in AR good campaigners or leaders, I suppose, is believing in the infinite potential of people if they're given the right support, the right guidance, and the right opportunity. And yeah, so that's like a fundamental. That's like that's our operating system. These two principles. Yeah, so it's like aiming for. Our mission is a 100% plant-based food system, and we orientate everything towards that, and we don't settle for less. And we orientate ourselves towards people power. And creating people who can, by moving through the world, change it. Because they've been transformed by their experience. So that's like the source, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Abby.
So I think for me, I was going to say I have a lot of energy. I think next to Ben, it's hard to compete, but I think I'm a bit of a dog with a bone. Like I do not like to be told no. I like to see something as a challenge that needs to be resolved. This is kind of a game of chess where you've got to move your piece and see what happens next and be as strategic as possible about how to reach that end goal. And I think, speaking humbly but bragging at the same time, I think my main advocacy for animals is really to try and kind of bring the media on side and to try and mass mobilize, change the public narrative, change the rhetoric around how we see animals, how we use animals and exploit them. So I think part of that is just relationship building, and actually, naturally, I think I'm quite a hermit. My partner will say, I'm in a lot and I like to just have my own little sanctuary in life. But at the same time, I think I'm building those relationships with experts and with allies and with other peers who I admire very deeply. And I think I try to use those to then move us forward. So really trying to put all those ingredients together to help animals as much as I can.
Okay, thank you for the introductions. So let's get back to obstacles and problems. If you could instantly solve one problem around campaigning, one obstacle in building more effective campaigns, what would it be? Abby, maybe you'd like to start now?
One obstacle.
Yes.
I feel like there are a lot. There are a lot of obstacles, I suppose, or one problem to solve. I think one thing for me actually is a new concept that I've learned actually through Animal Think Tank. This concept of bringing together different parts of the movement and moving away from this concept of rights versus welfare and that like infighting and the conflict, and rather looking at us as one big ecology working together. And I think that resonates very deeply with me, because all of the people in this room all have that same shared goal. We all want to make the world better. And at the moment, a big obstacle is that ideology where we're seeing ourselves as separate or, heralding one strategy as better than another. Actually, they're all parts of the same puzzle. And I think if we're able to share that same vision together and just simply move those pieces of the puzzle at the right time, I think that will help propel us forward.
Yeah. So as someone who's been in the movement for a while, do you think as a movement in general, are we moving in that direction?
I think we are, actually. I think there are more mature conversations happening. I think there's more strategic conversations happening. I think it's very natural for any campaigner to be quite emotionally driven. I'm still very emotionally driven. I also, like Chris, have a lot of rage. I love the antagonistic approach towards the industry, which is why I love my job so much. I get to do investigations and then humiliate the industry for the atrocities that they carry out. But I think it really is moving in a positive direction. I'm seeing a lot less infighting, a lot less aggression and hostility towards each other, because ultimately there aren't that many of us. There's certainly not that much money. We can't afford to waste another minute fighting with each other. So healthy conflict is a good thing, but I think when it comes to trying to poke holes in each other's strategies, it's not always necessarily that helpful.
Yeah. Ben?
Well, I would say you should try and poke holes in each other's strategies, but maybe actually, what was the question? Sorry.
So one problem, one obstacle to solve in campaigning.
Yeah, well, maybe it wasn't clear because we do. There's the direct action stuff, which is we were originally Animal Rebellion, so formed out the flames of Extinction Rebellion. But we also have plant-based universities. This is all part of the same thing, which is scaling campaigns for creating 100% plant-based campuses across the UK and Europe, and it's now scaling, and we're doing plant-based councils, the same thing, and farmers. But when things start going wrong for us, I think when we've really got lost along the way, I think is when we start, because we orientate ourselves towards the grassroots, to a grassroots organizing model, and it's when we've got, I find it interacting too much with funder metrics. I think one of the big drains on most campaigning organizations, I see it all the time, is orientating towards meals swapped or lives saved, which are these really short-term metrics that people start performing for, and it really distorts strategies. So that's like how funding is one of, and we felt this insidious effect before. So like that's one like thing that stops effective campaigns, is the distortion of strategy through short-term funding models. So for example, we deal with that by we'll drive off a financial cliff next year, then alter what we divert from what we think is an effective strategy to raise money. So that's one way, and also internally, one of the ways which I think stops effective campaigns is people internal career climbing. So we create a pay structure which is based on other factors beyond roles, so people stop trying to stop the distortion of the free market of ideas. And it's like all these details, we design a lot of this to, like, it allows like innovation. So it's like organizational design and culture and how finance and a lot of it interact with it that allow innovative and ambitious strategies to emerge. So rambling answer there, but.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I guess if I could pick one thing, I feel like there's a lot of talk about how we can't, and I think we will answer this question, talk about this question later in the panel. I think there's a lot of talk about how we can't find the right people, we can't find the right campaigners, we need more money to win these campaigns, we need so much more funding into the movement. And I feel like, yeah, maybe that's true, but I feel like a bigger component is the movement ecosystem. Like, we have so many good people. We have so many people specializing in so many different things. Like, there's so many different components, groups that are great at organizing, groups that are great at negotiating, groups that are great at legislation, groups that are great at campaigning. And I just feel like they're all working together, not good. Like, if we could figure out how to work together better, like bring people in, like, to be talking to each other behind the scenes, we'd be able to solve a lot of the problems that we're seeing now. I also think like for organizations, like thinking about where you fit in the movement, like groups have become so big over the last few years, like since I started doing activism. And I feel like this gives us a tendency to think about our own organization as a movement in and of itself. And you think like, here's my theory of change and here's what we're working towards. And like for me, this was never my framing for activism. Like it was always my relationship with people working at other organizations was always more important to me than my relationship with people within my own organization. And I don't give a shit about my organization's theory of change and what we think is the right path forward. I think about the entire movement's theory of change and working together. And I think like if we could start to solve for some of these problems of movement design, have organizations really specialize in being good at something instead of trying to do everything, we probably solve for a lot of these things without needing tremendous more resources, including human capital and actual money resources.
Do you think like we are on any path to solve it, or we need some divine intervention and some fixer coming?
Well, that's the trick, because the question was basically divine intervention. If I could snap my finger, then I would do that. I think this would take a lot of work, and maybe some of the problems are irreparable. And in the end of the day, like the ones suffering from those problems are animals. Like we're gonna be fine. We have jobs. We get to have nice conferences and eat food. But like, if we really want to do the hard work of really looking at ourselves in the mirror and being like, this is what I'm good at, and somebody else can be good at something and I need to trust them to be good at it, like this is maybe how we start to take steps towards solving for this.
Just on the funding, someone asked, I think yesterday, what would I do, or what would we do if we got like £10 million given to us? And that would make us implode. it would be the worst thing possible for us.
So give it back.
There seems to be, I see there's so much talk here about fundraising, but the other day I was at a meeting with a load of animal organizations talking about how they can work with the climate movement. And the only question on people's mind is, how do we raise more money? As if the problem is just an issue of spending. Like this technocratic solution to the problem, which, and I think it's that there is a over focus on that we think we can just scale everything up by spending more. So yeah, it was funny when it really, I think that would make us like, the more we've had seen teams grow when you're organizing volunteers from like a one-person team achieve more than a 6-person team, because once you start hiring more staff, volunteers aren't interested and the whole system starts to implode. So for us, it's a really delicate thing of just spending more, because you can only hire so many people. We couldn't be running like 90 campaigns across with 5 people in each across the UK and Europe by paying for staff. So yeah, there is definitely a corrosive impact organizations experience when they get money, and yeah, we're quite sensitive to that. So yeah.
Although if there is anyone here giving 10 million, we'll take it. Please don't go anywhere else.
Ben doesn't want it, but others.
We do need money, of course, but yeah, but not much.
Toby?
So I think there would be a lot of things I would like to fix or advance, but if I were to pick one, I kind of get the idea with the money, because the money doesn't solve anything by itself. I mean, we can be hugely ineffective with $100 million, but I think what we are lacking is how to move on to building more advanced, surprising long-term campaigns. I think maybe we suffer from too much success 10, 15 years ago with, I would say, basic campaigning. I think to a large extent the movement is pretty basic, and it's not to say anything bad about it, because I think often the basic stuff works, and it has worked so well with so many campaigns over the years. But at some people who tried doing SoMe campaigns like 10 years ago, I mean, they were hugely successful. You got a lot of people writing to companies and they were so afraid about it, and they were like, okay, yeah, whatever you want, you'll have it. And now they're catching up and they're learning, and they're like, okay, I mean, a shitstorm lasts for a day or a week. I mean, it's not a big deal. So what do we do afterwards? Okay, then maybe we'll buy a full page ad in the newspaper. In the beginning, whoa, that was surprising. But how do we keep surprising our opponents in a way where we can keep up the pressure for 1 year, for 2 years when it's needed, so we don't just try some things and then we're like, didn't really work. Let's do it with another company or with another company. Maybe that's some of the problems we're facing now also when we talk about the 2025 problem, that like a lot of companies committed, but they didn't really do anything. Was it because we didn't know how to do the campaign really effectively, how to build it long term to make sure that we get all the information we need, we know where to push the right buttons. So I mean, I think I see, once in a while I see some things that surprises me in a positive way, but it happens far too rare, and I'm not shooting at you, I'm shooting at myself also quite a lot, because it's been one of my talking points internally. It's like, we are too predictive and it's too boring in a sense, like just to say it like it is. It's like we do the same things over and over again, and in some countries or some organizations, like make the logo bloody, make a petition, go do some protest, do a press release, and I mean, it's all good, but if it doesn't work all the time, and if it's beginning to work less and less, then it says that we should do something else. So one of the things that we have tried with some success, but I don't think we can keep doing it. Maybe you can do it in other countries if you haven't, but it's like the reward campaigns where you like put up a big reward, and that's where money comes in. When you actually have money, you can put up a big reward, like, you know, 100,000 euros or whatever. Do you want to show us your farm? Show us how it's done. How do you produce chickens? How do you produce pigs? Whatever. And that's this sort of dilemma that is surprising and that is difficult for the opponent to get into, because either you show them and people will see how it is, maybe you pay some money, but maybe it was worth the money, but how often does that happen? Very often it happens that, oh, we don't really want to do it. Then that can become a scandal that you can build on. But what do you do after that? That's like the first line. Then maybe we could even advance this. So I would like us all to think about how to advance things, so we don't look too much at what did we do 2 or 3 years back, because maybe that's not so effective anymore. But I don't want to say it in a way that we shouldn't do it, because I think we quite often win those. And if we start now getting over-focused on building advanced campaigns, we might run the risk of just overkilling ourselves. So every time we do something, it has to be a 5-year campaign and with a lot of plans and blah, 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 blah. I mean, maybe we should try it simple the first few times, but when that doesn't work, we have to like pump up the volume. So I'll stop ranting.
Thank you. Moving over, can you explain your process of designing and building the campaign, both from the perspective of organization, but also from your like personal perspective, personal approach? How do you choose the goal? How do you choose the strategy for the campaign? How do you evaluate the campaign at the end? And the most important thing, which part of this process do you struggle the most? Chris, do you want to start?
No, but I guess when I'm like the only thing I work on is corporate animal welfare campaigns. It's basically the only thing I'm good at in the world, and it's all I want to do. And when I think about this, the perspective I'm usually taking is like overall, like not looking at one individual company, but how do I win from point A to point B to the point where something can be completely implemented, or I can transform some sort of system. And I think like for me, probably we agree on a lot of things, Ben, but the number one thing like I'm optimizing for when I'm running a campaign is I want to reduce as much suffering as possible. Like this is my main goal. I'm not trying to really reduce the number of animals. I'm trying to reduce the suffering of the animals that exist. So like that's one side of the optimization, is I want to help as many animals as possible and reduce as much suffering as possible. But on the other end, I also just really hate losing. And so like the other important component for me is the tractability of the campaign. So like analyzing this before we get started of like, do I honestly think I have the kind of leverage over this particular industry to make it difficult enough for them that they're going to commit to these changes and actually follow through on them? I think that I see this as like a scale too of like how easy is it for the industry to do this, and how difficult can I make it for the individual decision makers that are making these decisions. So like there's this kind of calculus, and I think like so often it feels like the scales become tipped like so far in the direction of we're just focusing on making this really, really suck for companies when we're campaigning, and we don't think so much about the other end, which is like, how do I make this easy enough for the company to achieve what I'm asking for? And the cost is like you start mitigating these asks of like asking more and more and more. Like you want to get as much as you can out of the company, of course, but then you might end up wasting a shit ton of time like running campaigns for months and months and months, and like it's just a huge waste of time. So like I think the thing I find most difficult is where I draw the line of what I'm willing to ask of companies. Like how do I determine this calculus of like how difficult this is, and like at what point do I push for as much as possible versus scaling it back and asking for less so that I can win faster. And this is like, I think, just kind of some sort of like eternal struggle with working on corporate animal welfare policy.
I guess our whole strategy is based around what we call personal transformation or transformation of organizations. And I'll explain what that is. And if you imagine a graph from confidence to knowledge, when you first start out on your journey, you don't know very much, but you think you know it all, and you're on Newman Mountain. And then the day goes wrong, and somehow you fall down into the valley of despair and think you know nothing. And instead of crawling back up onto Newman Mountain, thinking you know it all, you crawl up on your hands and knees up Wisdom Hill, and you're transformed by the process, and you've replaced your old assumptions with new ones. So that our strategy is based around that. How do we create that in individuals through the experience they have? So, for example, are we running campaigns in universities to pass motions to create 100% plant-based campuses? You could say that. But I think more important to me is that students go through an experience where they do something which they think is impossible and people are telling them it is. They go through it, they don't think they can, they nearly give up, and they come out the other side and they win, and then they move through the world, changing it as they go afterwards. And so it's how do we design that on a personal level, but it is fractal, of course, and how do we cause that drama and internal conflict and then coming out the other side in institutions, and how do we do that on a societal level? So it's a fundamental, it might look sometimes similar to what we do, but there's a fundamental different like philosophical approach of how we do things. And I guess when we're really lost, we don't plow on. When we're really lost, we look inwards and try and figure out why are we doing what we're doing, who are we, what is it we're trying to achieve, and listening to how you feel, because I think a lot of the world is run by thinkers, which is fine. I used to call myself a thinker. But of course, your feelings are also processing a lot of information, and too often people rationalize what they think is right. They rationalize this is effective. It doesn't feel right. But if you're smart enough, you think what you say and what you do are aligned, and then that's really when strategies start flowing. So maybe that's very bit metaphysical explanation.
Yeah, I guess the question is how do you translate it to the practice? Like
yes. Okay. So practice. So actually, we have we follow a simple, repeatable, and unbeatable model, a principle of strategy design. For example, you find something modular in anything which is modular campaign design. So in our case, universities, councils. We're going to do the same with churches. We're going to do the same with schools. You figure out how to win once anywhere. And then you build a system to scale up to win everywhere. So initially, when you're prodding a system, how can we create a 100% plant-based university, for example? You have to run pilots. You obviously design a strategy, and you could iterate until you've got a model that you prodded the system, and then you scale it up. So we do a lot of innovation and experimentation. And we also listen to people who have an insight. They feel very motivated to do something, to encourage them and go down that potential dead end and follow to the heart's content. Yeah, so definitely aligning where people's passion, because something magical happens when people's identity or something they're really passionate about is actually the thing they're working on. And there's when those two lines are, well, if they crossed entirely, that would be power infinity. But when it's close enough, so it's. I don't know if that's answered anything.
So they understand that experimentation means also that you just assume some of the ideas will fail.
Yeah, certainly, and we try and trust people's intuition. If they have an insight, maybe they've seen something. You have not. So we're actually in the process of piloting plant-based churches, for example, where it'll be organizing. We won't be speaking to pastors. We organize people who attend churches from the lowest common denominator, figure out how to get 100% plant-based church, and then ground it in like Christian or religious values combined with climate stuff. But anyway, we'll pilot. We're going to pilot that. Someone has just decided that is what needs to be done, and then we're just going to give them all the support they can, and then support to scale it up. Yeah.
Abby?
So I'm a project manager by background, so I have a really very methodological approach to this. I think I do like to have a clear plan. I think one thing I would really encourage people to do is not at all trust your instincts when it comes to campaigning, because I think there are some things that are not that obvious and you wouldn't realize. So for example, we rely heavily on other organizations that are known for carrying out research and for identifying where are there areas where there is the greatest neglect and the greatest possible impact. You might think it's one thing, and when they actually look at the data and analyze it properly, you'll see maybe that was wrong. So as an example, male chick culling in the UK is, from my perspective and from what the data shows us, not a good campaign. In other countries, it's fantastic. In the UK, ironically, because we see ourselves as a nation of animal lovers, we have more zoos, which of course doesn't actually mean that we're animal lovers, but people think it does. And as a result, the reptiles there then eat the male chick bodies. So actually, if we are then reducing the number of male chick bodies that are available for those animals to eat, we then have to import them from other countries, or a whole new industry will pop up for breeding purposes in order to feed those animals. So something that I 5-10 years ago would have thought, that's a fantastic campaign, I'm going to end the slaughter of 20 million chicks every year. Actually, perhaps there are other areas that I could dedicate my time to that may be more impactful right now, and leave that very complicated issue for somebody else to deal with who's far more intelligent than I am. But that's why, for example, we work on fish, is because they are so neglected, and yet there's 77 million of them being farmed and slaughtered in the UK each year. And then I think on a practical level, we'll carry out that theory of change. I'm very inspired by the Shack campaign, so I know that's a very UK reference to have made, but the Stop Huntington Life Sciences cruelty campaign, which had a huge amount of success maybe a decade and a half ago, and really they were able to essentially shut that horrendous animal testing site down. The only reason that it didn't work was because the government stepped in with subsidies, but they tried every tool in the toolbox and they nearly succeeded, and it was through mass mobilization, it was through protesting against all of the company's suppliers. It was really just stopping the tap at every opportunity that they could to cause the most mayhem for this company. And at times, maybe it went further than we would want to nowadays, but nevertheless, it achieved some incredible things that I think we can take some inspiration from. So I try to use that, work with the experts, and then otherwise identify the stakeholders, work out who are the people that you need to target, who are the ones that have power and who have interest that you can then work with to get to move the needle. But actually, in theory, these things can easily be created with a blueprint on paper, and then we just follow the methodology. We haven't quite achieved any of that yet. We're still in the process of it. It's going to be a long-term set of goals, I think, but actually we can make life simpler for ourselves if we just work on the experts within our own network and utilize them as best we can.
Yeah, Toby?
Yeah, so to me, picking the target is actually a really big issue for me, because I think quite often we can be like guided by maybe the rage or whatever. It's like, now it's time, they need a campaign. I remember with the, not necessary, but I remember with our broiler campaign in Denmark, for the first 2 or 3 years, we hardly had any campaigns running. Like, we had a small burp here and there, but it was 5% of our efforts, and I was the one really holding back, saying, no, it's too early. We need to talk to all these companies. Like, there's none that has qualified for a campaign yet, because they actually have legitimate reasons right now why they can't do it. There's no availability of the product that we are actually wanting them to upgrade to, and so many problems that we don't understand ourselves. So how can we start a campaign? Because the moment you press a button, you have to keep moving, otherwise you will look weak. If you just do it for a month or 2 or 3 and then you change course, it's going to be really bad. So I think it took us almost 2 or 3 years, and then with the first 2 targets we picked, we won them in a few days. And that was actually with the simple stuff, just a few people going and protesting. Maybe one place it was 20 people, so it showed some strength, and then they were ready. But it was also because we had talked to 30 or 40 companies, so we knew, I wouldn't say exactly, but close to exactly, which companies would be the right ones to push right now. And we had already won some campaigns just through simple negotiation. And that's maybe something that is a little bit misunderstood. I think, at least I've heard some misunderstanding around doing the positive campaigning, because that's part of what we do, but I think most people don't consider it campaign. They consider it more like, now it's time to take credit, or now it's time to, scratch their bag while you scratch mine or something. But when you do a positive campaign, and honestly, I don't like it too much, because, I mean, I don't like the companies that much. I think some of the people that we talk to, they're quite nice because they're people just like you and me. But the companies in themselves, I don't really like what they do in many, not only for the animal things, but in general, I think there are a lot of problems with that, and that's another discussion. But if we can kind of put that apart and then say, what is actually the benefit of praising a company for doing something? It's actually an accountability part of the campaign that is extremely important, because once you've praised a company and it's out there, then you also have it as leverage the moment that they maybe regret wanting to fulfill it. And if we had that with all companies now, it would give us more leverage to push the campaign. I think in everyday life, and like what I said before about the advanced campaigns, that's the one thing I regret the most, that we are not good enough at currently. So about how we build a campaign, often we do it like for a short period of time, being, okay, this is our main retail target for broiler chickens. If we can do one big push for a week or two that will get media interest, then at least we will keep the issue on the agenda, not only for that company, but also for the other companies. Because it's very important to realize when you do campaigns, you don't just do it for that particular target, you also do it for the others. So I think in that way we are able to, with limited capacity, to I wouldn't say get the most of it, but at least get quite a lot out of it, that we can do a quick campaign and then move on. But I would like to do it even better than that. So I'm not that proud of it, but that's how we do it.
I have one thing on that. This is interesting. I think for me, something I've noticed is when people are designing corporate campaigns, you go out and you do your negotiations and you talk to the companies first. And I feel like you go to the company and all of a sudden, you thought of this company maybe as your enemy or as your adversary, and then you sit down with them and you realize oh, there's this lovely, charming person across from me. And you're like, of course they're lovely and charming. They're executives at food companies. You wouldn't have gotten this job if people didn't like you. And maybe they actually care about what we're talking about. And then your first instinct is okay, great. I got my friend at this company. Forget about them for the campaign. This is going well. And then you think oh, the company we're going to target rather is the company that does not care at all about animals and is being terrible, won't answer my emails. They need pressure. Reality is, it's the exact opposite. The company you should be targeting is the one that has a nice person on the inside, and as soon as you identify somebody who cares, that's the person you bury. And it's it is start with the whole thing is a domino effect. You start with the lowest hanging fruit. If somebody at a company is a good person and cares, then they're a champion, and you can force them, and honestly give them the tools to convince their bosses, who are the real ones who make the decisions, that this is the thing that they ought to be doing. And not that that's your experience, but this is my experience.
But just a quick, I think it's sometimes very true, and at other times it's about how much patience do you have. So to me, it's always about, are you just a smooth salesperson guy that says all the right things but no action, or are you the one actually working with me on the inside to see if you can change it? And sometimes I can give up to 1 or 2 years, and then it's fine. And at other times, I'm after 3 or 4 months, I'm I don't believe it. And then I will just state it, obviously, openly, and just say, well, it sounds all good and nice, but it doesn't sound like you're doing anything. And if you're not, then a campaign might be the next issue. But I actually like to do things very transparently and not do all the surprise attacks, because we need to be able to work with these companies in the future also. And probably there are mixed feelings about it, and probably also some benefits about the surprise attack things. But I have this tendency to feel that maybe the downsides are a little bit bigger than the upsides in general. But happy to be confronted or proven wrong.
I think this is true, but I would just argue that I feel like your experience is having to do everything. Because Anima's kind of the only game in town. I don't actually know that, but I'm assessing from 1,000 miles away. And it feels like you have to both be negotiating and doing the campaigns, and this is a tricky spot to be in, but imagine if you could optimize just for being a complete asshole. I guess then maybe you'd be more like me.
Okay. I just hope the nice people from companies don't listen to us today. Okay, I'm happy that Abby mentioned the Shack campaign, because there's the smooth transition to next question. Maybe many of you remember the big Shack campaigns in UK, but also in different places in Europe. And what I remember is that there were many big process in UK, all around Europe. The movement was huge. And I see that it would be very difficult to organize anything of that size today, for example, about broiler chicken welfare, to have thousands of people protesting on the streets in defense of broiler chickens. So the question is, what should change in our campaigning in order to be able to mobilize the public that way? Or maybe you think that we actually don't need it? Ben?
I'd say there has to be a plausible chance that people get involved in things because they think there's a plausible chance them getting involved can change the world. So if you've got a strategy where the range of outcomes is like a little bit of impact to a little bit more, people aren't going to get out of bed and work all their evenings and weekends to make that happen. It hasn't got that we're going to change the world feeling. But if your range of outcomes is total collapse to we're going to change, if we roll all our dice right, we can change the world. People are willing to gamble on that. And there's I've heard this, do we even need grassroots? Or people can't be bothered to do anything? It's because people are getting asked to do crappy stuff, like give out leaflets, or be involved in campaigns where they're not got a chance to feel the benefits and really see that some transformation happen in themselves or the people around them. So I mean, I've heard this, and it's just like this weird self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, like we just give people, go give out leaflets, and people can't be bothered to do that. I can't be bothered to do that. I don't know anyone here can. So yeah. So it's strategies which have cascading effects. So this is what I was talking about, the funding. And people often think, oh yeah, meals swapped, animals saved. But that's like that. If you were to take a 1 second snapshot of time, maybe that's a good way to look at it. But we don't live in a 1 second snapshot of time. We live in a dynamic, complex system that we want to. Strategy is about using our limited resources to target something that, if we are successful, will have cascading effects through the rest of the system. So we're running a campaign, for example, for the RSPCA, which is the world's biggest and oldest animal charity, to drop the RSPCA Assured scheme, which is a farm certification scheme. They put their name on it. It provides some welfare benefits, but also legitimizes and promotes the meat industry. And as I said, we orientate our strategy towards ending animal farming, and in our analysis, we'll always prioritize that. But our logic is that by getting the RSPCA to pull out the scheme and support a plant-based transition, and we've been running a campaign targeting all sorts of branches and had hundreds of people ordering posters, and we've been meeting with the RSPCA, and we did the biggest farm investigation in UK history by training 50 volunteers, is that will have cascading effects through the system and also internationally. So for example, through the other equivalents in other countries, for the RSPCA shifting their position, but also through the other big NGOs, like the National Trust in the UK, which is a massive nature organisation, and then through the rest of the animal movement. So yeah, it's designing. Very often, I think, this very short term is look at strategy, but we have to look at it from just cracking the network and letting it unravel itself. I'll stop there, actually. Lost my train of thought.
Yeah, I do think as a movement we need to get better at this. I think we had it and then we've lost it for whatever reason. Maybe because we've gained other knowledge over time, but become much more strategic in many ways than we were before, and we're very effective nowadays in many ways that we weren't before. But at the same time, in order to get those gains, we've perhaps lost some of the other benefits along the way. One thing that I've loved lately, and I've actually been really inspired by, is I'm getting quite a lot of older guys call us because they're retired men who just want to do research and write opinion pieces. And I've been so pleasantly surprised by the skills these people have. They are much better at research than I am. They are much better at writing than many people in my team are, because they've got hours and hours to ponder over this stuff. I've got my dad doing work for me all the time, because it's just people want to help. And I think we really need to individually try and figure out, who are you people? Where are you? How do we find you? How do we use you in a way that's going to help animals the most? But they are out there and they really want to help. And it's not, as Ben mentioned, it's not a matter of go on then, I'll send you a few leaflets. No, really, what can we actually do with these people? Because they have such incredible skills to offer that at the moment we're not really maximizing. So
do you think you currently do have the structure as Animal Equality to get people involved that way?
I don't think Animal Equality UK does. I think we do it better in many of our other offices, so it's probably a failing on my part rather than the organisation. But I think it's a capacity issue at this point of just not really having the time to be able to dedicate to those people. But nevertheless, I think it can be done, and that would be something I would love to see, in a few years when we're here talking about new bottlenecks in the movement, I hope that won't be one anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like we are maybe, it's a very hard nut to crack, and I don't claim to have really the answer, but I think I have some kind of idea of what the reason might be. And the thing is, if we survey like the general population in many of the countries that we live in, they are on our side. Like they want animals to be treated fairly. They might not have the exact same idea of how we have it, but it's like maybe 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, even 10 out of 10, depending how you ask the question, will be like, yeah, what you're doing is good. But I don't think they feel it like 9 out of 10, that it's so important that they want to go out on the street and actually do something. That's only like the very small minority that we are part of and a few other people are part of. And maybe in the past, like when Abby mentioned Czech, like very radical campaign, like we need to shut this place down. Like that's like a very big ask, and that can be extremely motivating for people who are very deep into the trenches about the issues. So what is happening now in the movement is, with effective altruism and all these kind of thoughts, oh, it's about shrimp eyes, or about chickens growing like slightly slower, but it's like, it's what we can achieve. Like we would have it, wanted to have it much differently, or like get out of cages, but then still be in some barn systems with like 80% the same stocking density or whatever. It's a little bit hard to get like the people who are really interested in it to really get like so motivated and say, well, yeah, this is what I want to spend all my free time doing. Then you would rather maybe get involved in like a more radical campaign, which may or may not be more effective. So I think that's kind of the thing that maybe we are dividing ourselves a little bit by, you know, having some abolitionist kind of campaigns, which will be more attractive to people who want to get active, and then we have all the others, which is extremely hard to get people to. And then I think a lot about digitalization and stuff has just made it harder to get people involved, and especially now that social media is doing worse and worse and worse, then it's also not so motivating. So there are many things to it, but I just wanted to throw that thing out. Maybe Chris can build on it with some ideas.
I was going to react because there's like a total false dichotomy between like the grown-up incremental campaigns or achieving what is possible, and as if, and then the grassroots campaigns, which are sort of idealistic and not able to achieve what they do. Because we are, so we're getting that. This is just about good campaign design. Like we get the 100% ask is, for example, is across universities. It's happening in 12 in the UK and 1 in Graz recently, through the National Union of Students in the UK and the National Union of Students of Austria, is a 100% ask. So it's not, do we just do what's possible? I think social movements are, well, I think we try and change what's possible and then do that. And so there is, and people aren't getting involved. Like we had a period of 18 months where there were 500 arrests. It was like Stalingrad. And we have 400 university students involved across campaigns across the country. Plant-based councils. We had a training for 40 people the other day, where a woman arrived, not having anything to do with it, and by the end was crying, saying, "I didn't realize people were trying to change the world. I believe I can change the world." And we hugged, and that is all about design. This isn't happening by accident. And I'd say, like, for example, the meeting was framed at the start of, if you're here to be told what to do by the experts, go home now. The door is there. If you're here because you've got a vision of a more beautiful, better world, let's work together. And it's like that. So it's not that people are apathetic at all. It's that the campaigns designs, many of them, suck for volunteer participation. That's the problem. Yeah, it's not that people are apathetic. So yeah, I would say it's a matter of design. And university students, we didn't have any university students involved before. And you could have concluded university students are apathetic. We found 1 or 2, designed a system that could scale and started sucking people in. So it's just a matter of designing effective campaigns where people who are running campaigns are the heroes of the story, not the organizations who start narrating themselves as the heroes. We're just, yeah, so yeah, and there's all sorts of cultural factors. You need a culture of a central team that is conducive to organizing volunteers and all sorts of stuff, but it's not yeah, it can be done, and can be done really well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think your point is good in the sense that you have found a place where it works in that way, and I think that's great, and all power to that. I think it would be hard to, and maybe like there is a good design, but like when you look at the really big volumes, like the retail sector that maybe sells 70% of all animal products, like I doubt that you could find an ask that would be 100% for them, with the movement that we have now. Maybe in 10, 20, 30 years time, if the movement has grown a lot bigger, then the ask could be bigger. But that's where I'm mostly focused on the big volumes. And then I'm sure that you could do some type of campaigns where you find like, here is a good path, here's something where we can ask for more. So we don't ask for the same low level for everyone. Maybe you can ask more for some instances and less for others.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree. Like, what is a transformative ask? And I think there are two. There's the inflection point of when consumption is going up, you ask that it must come down each year. That is a transformative ask. So that's a fundamental change in direction. And then once they've already agreed to start coming down, that's when you start trying to get to 100%. So yeah, it's not always 100%. It depends on the size of the target and stuff like that. But it's just something which requires them to change the paradigm, the assumptions that they're currently running on. So there's lots of ways to frame, what they ask is. I totally agree. Depends on the context, but yeah, I do agree.
Chris?
Yeah, well, first of all, Ben, you can call me a welfarist. You can call me a sellout. But if you call me a grown-up again, even more offensive, Toby, it's not only about not cutting the shrimp's eyes off, it's also about electrocuting them to death, which I don't know how you're not inspired by this ask. This is very exciting to me.
I'll go out on the street now.
I think like the question we're drawing is like, how do we replicate Shack campaign or something like this? And I think we're only focusing on the part of Shack where it was huge numbers of people coming out. And I think part of it is we're living in a different time. But I also think like we are kind of replicating the Shack campaign in certain organizations in design. Like the original campaigns that I was running at THL was all based off the fundamentals of the Shack campaign. And I think from campaign design perspective, it was like, we know this isn't going to be a popular campaign. Nobody cares about chickens, except for a small handful of people. But the things that we can do, the leverage points that we have, is targeting individual decision makers, making their lives hell, and also targeting business partners. So anybody who does business with this company is a target. You're complicit in animal cruelty just as bad as the company that we're actually targeting. And so like, I don't know. I guess maybe I fall more in the camp that for corporate campaigns, it's like, think about the tools that you have. Having tons of volunteers, that's one tool, but it's not the only tool. And it maybe is not the most critical tool. Like, yeah, it'd be great if we could turn out 100 people, but maybe it's not necessary. I also think like bringing this focus, somehow I think many groups doing corporate campaigns have moved away from thinking about it this way of like, we're not really targeting the company. If we tried to run a campaign against McDonald's, we will lose. Like they already know they suck. And like us pointing that out to everybody in the world is not going to get us where we need to go. The points where we do have leverage is targeting the individual decision makers, people who do not care as much about this as we do, being willing to do basically anything we need to do to those people to make them make a decision. And then I also think focusing on targeting business partners. And this doesn't have to be done in person. This can be there's like, we now have so many digital tools at our disposal. But I think the in-person stuff also doesn't even have to be huge numbers of people. It just has to be incredibly annoying. And like, if it's just like a handful of really dedicated people, you can get a lot done. Like just decide what your tactics are. It's probably not send 4 people to go stand outside of a store. But if you have 4 people, what else could you do? Like, what can you do with 4 people that would be really impactful for companies? Maybe you go knock on every single door in their neighborhood and like hand out literature to every single one of their neighbors and make their lives just terrible. Or like, yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's like, if you don't have a ton of volunteers, I don't think it's like critical. And I think like it's probably, and I think there could be some other calculus of like, yes, we don't have as many people on the ground, but now we have way more people online. And like, maybe you get like 2,000 people who just barely care enough about what you're talking about to click a button. But this could be enough to like shut down internal servers at companies for days. And this would be incredibly annoying. So yeah, anyway. Yeah, I guess I fall more in the camp of like, I'm not sure it's absolutely critical that we have gigantic numbers of people in order to win specifically corporate animal welfare campaigns.
Do you think we need some like public support when it comes to like accountability campaigns, especially when, like, for example, the year 2025 and all the cage-free commitments coming? Do you think how important is the public support in a situation like that?
I think again here, like as an animal rights activist, I don't really want to focus my time convincing people they should buy cage-free eggs, and I think that's the public support that we'd have to look for. So it just can't be the option, and I think it probably something more critical would be not the groups campaigning, but having other solutions, like making this simpler for companies, so that way this campaigning calculus that I talked about at the beginning is more balanced. Like this is simpler for companies to do. They don't have to solve every single problem. The only problem they have to solve is price. And then on the other end, we up the ante on campaigns and make things worse and worse and worse.
Okay. So I know from many private conversations I have with other campaigners, with people from different organizations, that they struggle with hiring new campaigners. So the question is, how do you find and identify good campaigners? Many groups are struggling with recruiting for the campaigning positions. So what are your ideas for this problem? Or maybe you think that we shouldn't even do that, and maybe we just should rely on the human capital that we already have and just approach it differently. Ben, you want to start?
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's not how do we find them, it's how do we create them. So almost it's a culture that allows people to become the person, better, more than they ever thought they could be, and that's linked to, you know, have to have that belief in people. But like for example, sorry, Sarah. But Sarah left school. Sarah, who's running Vegan Support the Farmers, we have a culture like Sarah got involved. She's now leading the project Vegan Support the Farmers. But this is like quite normal in that no one comes into animal rising with experience, and she didn't go to university, was working at McDonald's not long ago and got involved a year ago, and has been transformed by like the support and culture, and by taking on huge amounts of responsibility and being allowed to fuck up, allowed to make mistakes. So I think the question is, yeah, not how do you just use rob Peter to pay Paul, but and this is the role that the grassroots play, is that so many people, it's a factory. it's an activist producing factory. So we're starting to fill it up in the UK with loads of people from unis and councils. But then they come through this network. We don't parachute people in. It always goes wrong when we parachute in some like marketing person or something. It always goes wrong. And we much more important to us is cultural alignment. And we do that by bringing people who've done the hard yards, run a campaign, which is an automatic filtering process. And by the time they've been a university coordinator, then a regional coordinator, they're ready. And so that's it's such an important, it's like an ecosystem service, having like a functional, it's like a boot camp running these campaigns, which are valuing themselves. But yeah, so now probably like 100 students from the PBU, plant-based universities, are graduating every year and going on to things. And yeah, if you don't have that, you just end up with this hollowed out, professionalized class of the experts without it's a false economy. Yeah. So how you find good people is having a healthy and well-functioning grassroots, which is feeding the rest of the ecosystem. Yeah.
Abby,
if that's an answer.
I think going back to something that Toby said earlier about if we're not careful, we end up all stagnating slightly in how we approach campaigns, because we've got this kind of rhythm that we're into where it's like, do an open letter, do a written question, go and do a protest, hand out a leaflet. These are all really good things, but I think sometimes we just get so caught in the washing machine of it all that we're not really thinking as big as we could, or as ambitiously or as creatively as we could. So I think actually something I try to really prioritize is bringing people in where possible, actually outside of the movement. I like that too, to try and like encourage more people in where I can, because they might have very, very different thinking that we've not even considered before. They'll bring a completely different perspective. And also, controversially, I'm not signed up to any other animal protection movement newsletters. Like, I don't keep up too closely with what everyone else is doing, because I actually think it's a good thing to not imitate and not emulate what everyone else is doing. I like the idea of them doing their own unique work and we'll do ours. And then it means that you come with like very fresh eyes on what you're working on. So actually it doesn't necessarily help the situation in trying to find those campaigners, but actually maybe it's just a matter of perception. You don't have to find someone who has campaigner on their CV for them to be exceptionally good at that job. Actually, it's just all about the right mentality and someone who's willing to be super gritty, really resilient, really creative, a proper problem solver about it.
I would say the struggle is real. It's really hard to find campaigners. I think we've all experienced it. And part of the reason is nobody is kind of trained as campaigners. It's something that you learn by doing it, and it takes a long time. And even the ones just like Chris started saying, like, it's not like, I'm not so good at this, I'm not so good at that, and then I find people, and I think we all feel like that. We're not so good at so many things because, I mean, it's hard to be good at everything. But I think, and also like to say that maybe a slightly unpopular thing, I think as a movement, we are not that great. Personally, I don't think we're that great. And I'm also like putting that at myself and my own colleagues. I think we're just doing moderately at campaigning in general. And at times we're doing great, and at times we're doing really poor. And obviously some people who have worked with it for 10 or 20 years are often much better. And I think we have failed ourselves in actually teaching each other how to do it and actually taking people under our wings and spend a lot of time building capacity. Because if we did that, and if we did that for the next 10 years, that all the people, like, instead of just moving too much into management and leadership and all these kind of things, and like, okay, you just do what I used to do, and then you find your ways, and times are changing, and we're not really evolving. Like, if we did that for the next 5 or 10 years, I think we could be like, you know, not 100, say moderate or average or slightly above average campaign, then we could be like really great campaigners. And then maybe what some of the others are saying, then it would be easier to just bring in motivated people, and then they could get into a team of really great people. And if you play football with great people, you become a good footballer. But if you play with people who like playing football, but they don't really know exactly how to do it, it's really hard to improve. So, I mean, it's not so popular, and I don't want to put anyone down, and I'm putting myself down also with you, so sorry.
Thank you.
Just on that, I would add as well, I think one thing that would really help is if we were a bit more honest about where we have made mistakes with our campaigns, because then you don't see everyone going through the same cycle of learning it themselves. So for example, one thing I did that I now look back on and really cringe is that when I first became a campaigner, I spent $5,000, which to me is a lot of money. I spent $5,000 on some billboards that were anti-dairy billboards. And, you know, it's not disastrous. It's not a terrible thing to have done. But it was just like, I remember someone saying to me, but, well, where are the billboards? Why did you do it? And I was like, I don't know, just to like tell people that dairy's really bad and that cows and calves are separated, right? Like, isn't that the objective? And it's like, well, that's not a terrible thing to have done, but it was also just like a bit dumb. I could have like maybe targeted someone and actually thought more about that. I could have put it outside of a dairy conference center or something that had like a bit more strategy behind it than just I'm telling the world that it's bad. And I think like we should tell each other this stuff, because I could have spent that $5,000 on better things, and I'm glad to now know it, but I would hope that other people won't make the same mistake. So never do anti-dairy billboards. I don't want to see any of them. Because actually, yeah, I think if we share that knowledge, we'll all naturally be raising the bar for future campaigners as well.
Chris?
Well, I think I'm really great, and I've never made a mistake, so...
I take it back.
No, I think, yeah, like Ven, you said, it's not about finding them, it's about recruiting them. For me, it's like not about finding them, it's not about recruiting them, it's about keeping them. And particularly keeping them campaigning. Like this is just maddening. Like, I mean, look around the room, like how many people are great campaigners in this room, have so much experience campaigning, and now your title is like manager, VP, director, CEO, like some made up important title. And it's just like the thing that we just keep doing over and over again as a movement is you take somebody and you're like, you are such a great campaigner. You're so great become a manager and learn a completely different skill set that you're probably going to be terrible at, and also don't do the thing that you're actually good at. And so like I don't know, like I think this is just like in order to grow and gain more power, we've been like creating these hierarchical structures where it's like across the board. Now we have a stable structure. There's good managers, competent managing specialists, and not doing the job, or not doing the job of campaigning. And I think like for campaigners, it just takes a long time. Like there could be boot camps, there could be more useful training tools. I totally agree we should invest in that. But like it just is going to take a long time. You're not going to be good for a long time. Like anybody who's been doing this for 10, 20 years, there's still room to get better. And I feel like I don't know why as a movement over and over again, we don't value the people who are actually doing the work. Like we think like people who have great management skills, people who have great leadership skills, people who, are like have a law degree or something. These are like the really important professionals, and the campaigners is some like entry level role where you actually are doing the things. And I feel like we need to just rethink this structure, because the best campaigners in the world, the people that I think are doing the best work now, are like, they don't have the burden of having to think about managing and leadership and like all this like extraneous stuff that it takes to run an organization. They just get to spend their time thinking about campaigns. And like more and more, I feel like we just need to figure out some better structure, some better pay scale. I mean, even like Ben, you're talking about this, like some sort of different ladder that allows you to just keep doing the things you're good at, but also not feel like you're not progressing in your career or like in your journey as an activist.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's move to a couple of individual questions. Ben, you already mentioned the campaign about RSPCA. Can you tell a bit more about it, especially like if everything goes as you imagine, the best case scenario, what would be the perfect result of this campaign in, let's say, 5 years? And I will add a second part of this question coming from Paul. What would be the devil's advocate case against your RSPCA assured investigation?
Yeah, so the RSPCA runs the RSPCA assured scheme in the UK. The RSPCA has a unique significance in the UK. Other countries might have a similar organisation, but it's not. It was like voted the top 5 trusted organisations in the UK, and it runs a farming assured scheme, which assures 50% of egg-laying hens, 25% of pigs, nearly 100% of salmon, and we're running a campaign for them to drop the entire scheme. And we started it off with trying to disrupt the one bad apple narrative, which was so that's why we released 45 farms in one go. And yeah, it is a controversial. It's definitely a controversial campaign. But the aim is but as part of having that scheme, which the RSPCA would argue, we've met them quite a lot. I mean, they believe in it wholeheartedly. There's no alternative. People will say it's about money and other things. It's the people. There is a certain element of large organisation inertia and lack of ambition, but it's people genuinely believe in the campaign because they view they've got a hold of the industry and trying to improve standards. And as part of getting a hold of the industry, they put the RSPCA label, RSPCA assured, on animal products around the country and run adverts. And we're trying to get them to drop the entire scheme. And this is supported. The president of the RSPCA is Chris Packham, and then other people like other vice presidents like Brian May, the basis from Queen, support the same thing. But the aim is for them to pull out of the scheme entirely and have a bold plant-based transition message. It's what are the so I mean, and that's the goal. And what are the risks? Many people would say that there's the animals under the scheme will have a worse life if the RSPCA pulls out, which is probably true. But at the same time, it doesn't provide legitimization just to the RSPCA products. Everyone in the UK who feels bad says, I only buy RSPCA assured. It legitimizes the whole industry. And the litmus test for us, I would never use the term like abolitionist or welfarist. That's some sort of ideological crap. This is about the strategy. And then the problem question that we're trying to address is, how do we end animal farming as quickly as possible? while the animals trapped in the system can have a good life as possible, so long as it does not undermine the meat reduction strategy. and that is the litmus test that we apply. And of course, we're trying to understand a system of like almost infinite complexity. So you have to build in some assumptions. And that's our assumption. When things fail that test, that's a bad thing. That it's helping legitimize the meat industry. So yeah, that probably does result in a short-term drop in standards. But the RSPCA, for example, there's fish farming salmon farming in the UK is exploding. It's a terrible industry. It's a terrible industry. Every single animal is living like a life of torture, and the RSPCA assured stamp is on that. And rather than and this is a new industry that's spreading across the world in the UK, and rather than stopping it in its tracks, they've helped massage its growth. Whenever they're criticised for their they get animal quality exposure all the time. They say we're only following RSPCA assured standards. They do it every time. They deflect. So that's the answer. Yes, the concerns are real, but it's standing in the way of a plant-based food system. So therefore, onwards.
Chris just recently decided to go from Mercy for Animals to start a new organization. So can you tell us a bit more about the reasons and what is the new thing about?
First of all, this is my first time representing ICAW at anything, so I don't have my talking points down. So this will be a mess. I think first of all, I've had these incredible opportunities in my career. I work at THL for 5 years, I work at MFA for 5 years. These are some of the most impactful organizations in the world. So I don't know who gets to do this. I feel incredibly fortunate for that experience. I think at this point in my career, the question I was asking myself was I know this is a thing that I'm good at, and by divine intervention, I found something that I'm good at in the world. And how do I build this vehicle around me to just be as successful as possible at this one thing? And so for ICAW, the goal is purely just optimization of winning corporate animal welfare policies through super aggressive campaigns. And that means focusing on what I think are the fundamentals and the things that I've learned over the last few years, which is always being super aggressive, always being extremely risk tolerant, always staying nimble, being able to being able to make decisions faster than our opponents, which I think becomes more and more difficult when you add more organizational complexity. So this is more about staying super lean, staying super nimble, being able to have extreme operating efficiency, and focusing on what are more or less the most effective possible interventions that we can get out of companies in the most effective parts of the world. And then finding the best campaigners, keeping them in campaigns roles, and just allowing them to succeed at winning campaigns.
Okay, Toby, if you could magically improve one skill among all animal rights campaigners around the world, what it would be?
It's always so hard with these just one thing.
One skill.
But I have a tendency to think that negotiation is something that there's a lot of room for improvement in my opinion. And actually knowing how to do the game of meeting with companies or other important stakeholders, putting yourselves in their shoes, not try to play too many games, not see this as too much, oh, now I'm meeting with the enemy and now I'm gonna make their life miserable and everything. I think that's not the best way. From my experience, that's not the best way to do it. And of course there will be situations where you could argue the other way around, but I feel not that many people, they go into the room thinking like that. They go maybe more into the room having a script. And I think getting away from the script of just being like the car salesman saying, well, this car is really great and it's really good, and if you don't do it, it's really bad, and da-da-da-da. I mean, I know this is a bit simplified, but I think there's a bit too much of that from what I've seen in my interactions with people who do this. So this is something I think if we manage to do a better negotiation game, we would have to run maybe fewer campaigns because we could settle more things at the table. And I've tried it many times, actually sitting with companies and figuring out, okay, so there was actually a solution that could be kind of win-win. They could save face, we could save face, we could all save resources, we could move on and get on to the next thing. So I think there is a lot of saving resources, moving faster if we could improve that as a whole. So maybe that would be my answer, but could be something else also.
Abby, being part of the Animal Equality, which is a big organization present in many countries, also big in UK, what do you think are the advantages of working from within a big organizations, and what things you think you could do better working in a much smaller group?
I think I'm in a very privileged position because I get the best of both worlds. So in the UK, we are actually quite small. There's only 7 of us, only 1 campaigner. So I think we are very nimble, very agile. It means we can just totally twist direction at any point and move very fast. And I think we do. I'm very proud of the work that we're doing, considering it is quite a small team. I think we're knocking it out of the park, to be honest. My team work really, really bloody hard. At the same time, I also think we're very fortunate to have, nearly 100 colleagues in 8 different countries. I get to learn from them, be inspired by them, call on them, cry to them. It's nice to have that support network and that kind of mentality that we're there to help each other. And at the same time, I've seen it in practice very recently. I was overseeing a campaign that we did internationally to get foie gras out of the Olympics. And to be project managing that was humbling, to say the least. It was difficult, very difficult. But at the same time, the output was phenomenal and stuff that you just wouldn't be able to achieve as one single unit. So for example, we had 15,000 emails sent from supporters to the International Olympic Committee, which really, really aggravated them. We were also in Vanity Fair, Le Monde, Forbes, places that I would have never been able to reach. But at the same time, it also meant really fiddly, annoying little things, like if there was a typo in a press release, then that was a typo in 8 press releases, and then I had to set tasks for 8 different people to change a really tiny thing. So I think it was eye-opening as an experience, but overall, I think I'm pretty fortunate that I get to pull on both whenever I need them.
Okay, we have some questions from the audience. First one is for Chris, from George. Do you think there's too much incentives like grants, evaluations for everyone doing the same things, and how do we deal with it?
You mean you mean like for corporate campaigns?
I think it alluded to something, but I forgot myself what it alluded to. 20 minutes in.
I guess you mean a diversity of tactics. I think that's fair. I think that maybe if it was this kind of idyllic world that I'm imagining where each organization was able to specialize in one particular thing, and then we're able to just work together really closely in perfect harmony, this maybe would be the case, that it doesn't make sense to fund more than even one organization to do corporate campaigns. But I think as it stands, the movement is kind of a mess, and also we're just human beings. It's all the movement is comprised of individual people making decisions, and I think it's probably not the worst thing that funders are giving money to allow activists to focus on more effective interventions. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I would solve for this. But I do think that the groups that are focused on whatever intervention they're being funded to do should think really hard and critically about what the role of your organization is and what you could be best at.
Okay, another question from Aaron. What is a campaign tactic or strategy that you would love to run that you haven't had the chance to execute?
I have one.
Yep.
So I actually remember Jan spoke about this a few years ago, and I loved the idea, and I haven't been able to do it yet. But he was talking about Anima doing an ALA campaign, which I think kind of briefly got mentioned by Toby, but essentially it was like a kind of a double-edged sword for the industry because they had nowhere to turn to not look awful. So really it was them coming out saying, you know, we'll pay farmers to showcase what it looks like to kill a male calf, a newborn male calf. And so then you've got all these farmers being like, oh, all right, I'll take the 10 grand and I'll show you the footage. But at the same time, Arla is scrambling thinking, well, that's going to look terrible for us. And I think in the end they did put something out. And I really like that concept of cornering the industry into having to tell the truth, and I think that's really fascinating. Another thing I would also really recommend is a book called Blueprint for Revolution. It talks a lot about sort of mocking big industries or dictatorships in the book, and really it has some really smart ideas in there about how you can create a situation where there is no way for them to turn without them looking really bad. And I think that's a really interesting tactic to use as campaigners. It's very, very open to creative concepts.
I have one thing that I'm curious about, if it's possible. I don't think I've seen it to a very good extent yet. I think we've tried a little bit, but not succeeding that well. But now that we're talking about maybe the lack of capacity, that it takes a lot of years to train really good campaigners, and it's not that we have thousands and thousands of those, but what has actually happened in the past few years is that more organizations have been able to fundraise better, so there is more money available, even though some don't want the money. But I'm actually curious about if that money could cut some corners while we are increasing the capacity of campaigners. Are there ways where we can do like really strong advertising campaigns for whatever campaign we're running, so we don't need to have 20 campaigners on board doing the campaign? Can we actually buy campaign victories? I mean, I'm sure if we had like $1 billion and we just kept saying McDonald's sucks or something, maybe they would have a hard time competing because we had more. Maybe we need more than $1 billion. I don't know, but you get the idea. But are we actually able, just like Abby says, well, she has 5,000, she can do a little bit of awareness building. That's not going to scare anyone. But what happens if you put 500,000 or 1 million and you know exactly what you're targeting? Is it possible for us to come up with a like very good slogan, good like specified targeting stuff? I don't know, but it's something that I'm curious about. I want to throw it out because maybe someone has a great idea and want to actually have the nerve to press a button, because we thought about some things, but then it's like a lot of money, and what if it fails? So I don't know.
Well, just clarify, we do obviously spend money. We have 25 full-timers, but we're just conscious of the corrosive impact it can also have.
Ben, is there any tactic or strategy that you haven't had chance to execute?
Well, I think sometimes maybe had the opposite problem of we've just run with insane things and caused ourselves a lot of problems. Like we blocked the dairy industry, like 7 distribution centers for a week with 200 people in Airbnbs, like 200 arrests, doing like just craziness, and loads of criminal damage, and people getting on trucks. So probably sometimes we have to temper our heart's content sometimes as well. So I'd say, yeah, just living the dream can sometimes turn into a nightmare. We've got 35 court cases this year.
It's going to be on your gravestone.
Chris, I assume the new organization is a pathway to execute all the tactics you haven't chance to execute?
I think that a majority of individual tactics that I'd like to do, I don't really want to talk about here. But I think the main thing that I'm most excited about is I feel like there tends to be I think that there's a tendency from campaigners to get really precious about the stuff that we're putting out, just because we have a lot of like pride in what we're doing, and we want it to be as good as possible. And I think that more often than not, if we made some other calculus of like, if this individual tactic I'm doing, if this event or this material that I'm putting out is, I can make this 10% better, but it's going to take 30% more time to do that we should choose just to make it worse and like get it done. Because I think in campaigns it's more about speed. So I think the thing I feel most excited about for for figuring out at ICAW is like just how to do things as quickly as possible and get materials out there as quickly as possible and move campaigns really fast.
Okay, thank you to all of you. Our time is up, but keep in mind that all of them are available for you tomorrow to talk. Very smart people, lots of things to learn from them, so I'm sure they're more than happy to talk to you. So thank you very much, and see you.